Second Honeymoon, a bonus chapter from An Affair Abroad by T.K. Richards. The lift dropped the newlyweds off in the loading zone of the airport. Maximus wheeled their bags inside to the check-in counter and stopped. "Where to?" he asked. Nadia pushed his shoulder and cackled. "What do you mean, where to? Home, silly." "We just exchanged our vows, love. That calls for a second honeymoon. Pick a destination. Anywhere you want to go in the world." He kissed her forehead. Nadia backed away and smiled at the seriousness in his eyes. She looked at the board of flights and back to him, then scoffed. "Puerto Plata," calling his bluff. Maximus questioned her assertiveness with a smile. "Done," he said, placing her hand in his, and approached the ticket counter. She stood at his side while he worked his magic with the clerk. 10 minutes later, they boarded a plane into Miami with a 1-hour layover, then a 2-hour flight into Santo Domingo. The rocky turbulence from the flight was nothing compared to the leather-gloved driver whipping and wheeling the shuttle van to the resort in Puerto Plata. Nadia held on to the seat and her husband for dear life as the driver smiled and joked, leaning with every sharp turn. When they arrived at the resort, she dropped to her knees and missed, kissing the ground by 1/8 of an inch. "Thank God we made it," she shouted. Mash laughed at her theatrics. "I forgot this is your first time traveling to these parts. All the drivers drive like that here." He passed the driver a tip. The staff greeted them with mixed drinks topped with pineapples and cherries floating at the rim. "Welcome to Lifestyle's holiday resorts," Nadia whispered to Mash. "Like the condoms?" They both snickered as the hostess continued. "Mr. and Mrs. Sharper, our trusted associate Marco will drive you to your villa. Your welcome packet will be on the bar when you arrive. It has all of the information about the resort, and with your all-inclusive package, I am sure you know if we have it, it is yours." The hostess smiled. "We hope you enjoy your stay." Marco and another attendant loaded their luggage into the back of the extended-sized golf cart. "Marco, I'm going to need you to take it easy on the road, okay?" A big smile grew on his lips, and he nodded continuously. See. Mash wrapped his arms around Nadia and held her tight until they reached the villa a quarter of a mile down the path. He helped Marco bring their bags inside, tipped him generously, and made his way over to his wife. "Are you tired?" he asked, lifting her onto the kitchen counter. "A little," she answered. He lifted her T-shirt and kissed her neck as the cloth momentarily blinded her. She sighed. "I see you weren't tired." He grinned and covered her mouth with his, softly extracting her tongue with fond kisses he patiently waited to land over the course of the evening. Her back melted in his hands and sunk into him. In between kisses, he revealed, "I wanted to fuck you on the plane, in the bathroom in Miami, and on the side of the road once we landed. Opportunity never knocked, and I didn't want to risk going to jail for pleasuring my wife." "I would have let you fuck me in all of those places if you had asked," Nadia teased, spreading her arms wide and arching her back as she lowered to the hard white and gray granite countertop beneath her. Mash was overly riled up from the anticipation of getting her alone. He skipped the regularly scheduled maintenance of teasing her and making her beg for him, because it was he who was desperately in need of her healing waters. 2 of his fingers tested her center. "Drenched as always," he murmured, sliding her near the edge. Nadia placed her calves on his shoulders, smirking at his compliment. He moaned and sank his teeth in his bottom lip at her tender grip of his rigid insertion. "My wife," he whispered, wishing he could bottle that quick feeling of her walls clenching around his wood whenever he entered. He lowered to kiss her mouth. "Mrs. Sharper," he sighed, tasting her lips once more before stroking deep, strong, and slow. His hips motioned in circles, tattooing the tip of his head into her corners. "You never disappoint," Nadia exhaled. Her words encouraged him to dive deeper. He wound his hips, waiting to feel her slick walls cream on his throbbing dick. Her waistline thrusted forward, coordinating the play-by-play, until they both scored in her goal, crying out screams of passion, lust, and love. The vacation home was properly christened upon their arrival, setting the tone for the days to come. Resting in his arms, Nadia inquired, "How did you do all of this on a whim?" "The new management team. Once you told me where you wanted to go, I sent my new assistant a message, and she took care of everything during our flight. I'd say she passed the test. Wouldn't you agree?" Nadia nudged her forehead yes against his shoulder. "I've tired you." Let's go to bed. Mash lifted her. Nadia never went to bed soiled. Mm-mm. Shower first. I want to sleep in tomorrow. She hummed against his chest. The sun shone for hours before the sleeping beauty caught a glimpse of his radiance. Maximus woke before her to open the door for the personal chef assigned to their villa. Nadia slept through the noise of pots clanking, spoons tapping bowls, cabinets opening and closing, and Mash sneaking kisses to her cheek to wake her. Unable to sleep, Mash toured the house, decorated mostly with accents of pale blue decor, multicolored seashells, and random jars of white and brown rocks on the dressers in each of the 3 bedrooms. He roamed the marble floors, which kept the house cool from the outside temperature, finding a white paper bag of jellies, jams, and sweets on a table in the foyer at the entrance, with a note welcoming them to the village once again. The chef summoned him to the kitchen, seeking special requests before he completed his obligations. Mash ordered him to take the feast home for his family, keeping the freshly sliced fruit and French toast for Nadia. Hours later, she joined him outside, wrapped in the top sheet from the bed. Mash was leaning against the balcony, smoking a cigar he scored from Marco. Morning, she said, hugging him from behind. Her hands pressed firmly against his chest. Afternoon. He placed his hand on top of hers, releasing a cloud of smoke into the wind. Thanks for letting me sleep in. You slept through the clatter of breakfast being prepared. You needed the rest, he replied. Nadia lowered her hands to the waistline of his trousers and tucked her fingers below the belt. Well, I'm awake now. The sun lowered deeper behind the coastal blue horizon, leaving traces of its golden silhouette and spouts toward the white sands below them. Nadia teased, I bet you won't last long enough to see the top of Goldie dip its head in the ocean. Mash snickered, Oh yeah, you're well rested. He turned his back to the sphere and Nadia freed his member, squatted on the back of her heels, and sucked him off intensely to win the bet. Mash struggled to compose himself, marveling at the sight of her full lips making love to his cock. Her closed eyes and circling tongue gave him confidence in her desire for him. I love watching you, he whispered, holding the stray hairs blowing from the wind softly in his hand, caressing the corner of her mouth with the other. Nadia surprised him and added his finger to the action. Mash's dick stiffened harder than the railing he was leaning against and jolted at the risque move. Boisterously he sighed, then checked to see if they were being watched. Nadia removed his parts from between her lips. Who cares if someone sees? I do, he answered, lifting her from the balcony floor and carried her inside. He closed the sliding glass door behind him, pressed Nadia against it face forward, and licked his fingers. I don't know why I did that. I never have to, he expelled and spread her ass cheeks apart. Nadia braced herself against the glass with her hands, smiling she was about to win the bet. Mash pivoted inside and exhaled. Every goddamn time, and scraped the sides of her pussy in beast mode, smirking at the sound of her breast shrieking against the balcony door like a rag shining a glass table. The open curtain slightly shook from the vibration, the handle rattled from his every move, and she vibrated in his dominance. The sun was minutes away from its exit, and Nadia watched it sink in her euphoric state. She swayed her walls, but Mash pressed harder against the roof of her canal, stunning her attempt to make him implode. With each turn of her hips, he compelled against her with a strong hold against her flesh. Nadia grunted from the pressure, her sweaty fingers slid down the glass, and her back weakened from his antics. Okay, Poppy, you win, she mumbled, watching the sun take a permanent dive for the evening. Mash's lips curved a devilish grin. He stepped back and turned her towards him, then lifted her against the wet glass. Kissing her fervently, he muffled in her mouth. I won the night we met. Nadia smiled but lost it as Mash ambushed her garden without notice. Oh, she belted, her back squeaking from the condensation of the extended minutes her husband tapped out of her, finally exerting himself when darkness owned the sky. I'm starving, Nadia breathlessly respired. There's fruit from this morning in the fridge. Grab some and get dressed. I'm taking you to dinner. Mash lowered her to her feet. Dinner and dancing at a restaurant outside of their village delivered the perfect night of a clear starry sky, blended drinks, and live music. Mash two-stepped while Nadia danced circles around him, capturing the attention of the wallflowers, admiring them from the sideline. A friend of Marco's, Duff, introduced herself and convinced the couple to trust her for a day of sightseeing and experiencing the city like the locals. The next morning, The Sharpers packed an emergency survival kit inside 2 backpacks and embarked on an adventure with 2 other couples, the Malloys and the Doctors, of Puerto Plata's best-kept secrets. They trekked landscapes in Pino de Tata that led to a hidden waterfall, safe for sliding into a pool of bubbling blue water. Mash and Nadia passed on the exploit, laughing at the other couple's scream of fear on the way down the slide, joining them at the bottom of the pond. The wet couples raved about the experience of the fall as they hiked to a mountaintop and traveled across a narrow bridge overlooking the clear blue ocean from high. Continuing along the path led them into a village of local vendors selling keepsakes, baked goods, clothing such as sundresses, wraps, and hats, and fruit. Nadia received a lesson in the purity of the grapefruit, tasting the white flesh of one grown locally by a farmer nearby. "It's sweeter than the pink ones I normally eat," she confessed, walking away with a bag of them. Mash bravely tasted a sliced guanabana, cut by a woman freely swinging a machete. Nadia held up her grapefruit to the woman, afraid to try the exotic produce. Mash pinned her in his arms and forced his lips on hers to taste it. She squealed and squirmed, powerless to his hold. He whispered in her ear, "It's sweet, but not as sweet as you." Nadia stopped fidgeting and welcomed the flavor from his mouth, leaving with a second bag of fruit to haul back on the path over the bridge. Later that evening, they joined the couples they explored the city with for dinner inside the village. A night of drinks and laughter completed their final night in paradise, sending them back to the cottage, greeted by an unwelcomed guest. Nadia screamed, "Mash!" from the bathroom. He hurried to her call, finding her frozen against the wall, pointing to the corner of the mirror. Mash looked up and choked on swallowed laughter. "Don't panic. I'll get it." Nadia hummed, locking eyes with the lizard staring back at her until Mash returned with a glass and a pan from the kitchen. He carefully coaxed the reptile into the glass and trapped it inside with the pan. Nadia followed him to the balcony, instructing him where to release it. He glanced at her with a side eye. "Do you want to do it?" She fanned at him and they shared a laugh as the creature jumped into the tree branch resting against the house. Mash studied the look on Nadia's face and teased her. "It wasn't going to hurt you," he said. Nadia turned towards the moon half hidden behind clouds. "You don't know that," she chuckled. "But you do know I'm ready to go home now, right?" "I figured as much. We leave tomorrow afternoon." He stood beside her. "It's beautiful here, and we did have fun, wouldn't you say?" "Very much so, and we haven't walked on the beach once since we've been here." Mash leaned on the railing. "But we did witness another amazing sunset." Nadia grabbed his hand. "You witnessed it. My eyes were on something else amazing." He palmed her ass. "None of them will ever beat Ibiza," Nadia confessed. "Never." In the morning they welcomed the sunrise out back in a hammock and walked barefoot in the white sand. They returned to the house, greeted by the staff and chef outside near the pool where a smorgasbord had been prepared for them before their departure. They indulged on the feast and finished packing so the staff could transfer their luggage to the van, then braced themselves once more for the wild ride to the airport. Their trusty driver's huge smile greeted them. "Buckle up," he teased, and whipped and wheeled them back to Santo Domingo. 10 hours later, the newlyweds arrived in London, and when Nadia's feet touched the ground at Gatwick Airport, she held on her husband's arm and sighed relief. Home, sweet home.